Hello, good morning. How are you? Listen, my apologies. A few computer issues this morning. Normally we start at 2 o'clock, and obviously it's not 2 o'clock anymore. It's nearly 3:15 GMT if you're watching this on catch up or from abroad. So yeah, my apologies. It's taken me a while to get this all sorted out this morning and hooked back up. As you can see on the screen, there's little me in the corner, little me, big me, poking behind the image that we're going to be drawing. I'm going to continue the drawing that we did from last week, and I got to a kind of a stage of mapping it all out, and I was going to finish it off and show you the result, but then I thought, well, no, I can continue this drawing on in the next video. So I kind of stopped myself. So from where we left off last week, I kind of mapped everything out and I started to block it in a little bit, and I thought, no, this would be kind of an interesting point to maybe discuss and show and have a chat about it. So fingers crossed this is all working today. Obviously a few people who would have arrived at 2 o'clock found I wasn't here and got off and got on with life. Probably gone shopping and things. So if you're watching on catch up, my apologies. But if you want to join, you can do. When you do join, please say hello. It's always good to see people in the chat room. Ask any art related questions you want to. It's always good to have that conversation. It really helps with the whole sort of internet broadcasting, but it's also really interesting to find out what is in your interest about art, what it is you're having problems with, things that you're coming across that you find difficult, things that you want to discuss, any great opportunities that you may have come across, any art competitions that you've found you want to share with us, brilliant, do that. Any good resources, any good books, any good materials that you like, or any questions you have about them, here's a place to ask them. As you can see, the image I've got up here is from a book, and we'll put the book up there for you. It is How to Draw Portraits in Charcoal. It's by Nathan Folks. It's a great book of charcoal portraiture. It breaks down charcoal into such in a manner that is easily accessible by lots of people. If you're a professional, there's some great elements there to make you think about your artwork. If you're starting out, it breaks down some of the fears. It's, as I say, it's a really accessible book and some great imagery in there. And it's not necessarily about genres of art, realism over abstract, blah blah blah. There's lots of areas in this which you can see the expressive mark making nature of this portraiture, which still relates to something that has a certain amount of realism to it, but it's not hyperrealism. It's kind of has an impressionistic elements to it, expression in it as well. It's not a carbon copy of a photograph into the hyperrealism, but there are certain details in there which are very well observed, which you can move into that direction you wish to. So I found it was a great flexible book in that element, and so I decided to take one of the images and use it as a resource. So that's the book. If you're looking for a link, you can either watch last week's video, because there's links to that there. But again, when this is over, I'll update all the show notes and put the link to the book and any bits of materials that I use along the way. So hopefully that's okay. So we can get rid of that image now. I can zoom back a little bit. I've got my setup drawing here, so my camera is looking over my left shoulder at the drawing at a slight angle, but I'm pretty much directly in front. This is the basic setup, so when we're starting our artwork, it's always good to have your resource and your image that you're working on directly in front of you, so you're not being too distracted or looking over your shoulder at something and then trying to come back to your drawing. Even that slight delay from looking over here to your drawing, your mind will lose some of the information, and it's easier to constantly look at your drawing and the resource without having to move around too much and almost play spot the difference. So you can easily see where you might have to move or manipulate certain images. As you know, there is a program on television that I often talk about, which is Sky Portrait Artist of the Year, and over the last 5 weeks they have produced another series of live portraits that you can sit along and draw along or paint along to. They have a celebrity sitter and somebody who used to be on the show from a previous series, and there's a conversation that goes along. It's for 4 hours. It's on a Sunday morning. It's at 10 a.m. GMT, British Mean Time. But if you can't catch it, it's found on the Sky TV Facebook page. And when you go to, if you look at their videos, if you try to do it on catch up, or if you join it at 10 o'clock a.m. British time, it starts. There's a wonderful community of artists all around the world, all signing up at the same sort of time, having little conversations with each other in the chat bar, sharing what they're doing as a process. So you can put your hashtag, which is hashtag my PAOTW, which is my portrait artist of the week. And if you want to put that into Instagram, you'll see about 30,000 pictures of portraits of these famous sitters. Now they did this at the beginning of COVID. They did about 9 sitters then. They've done about 5 now. This week is a celebrity sitter, Jon Snow, which would be interesting to paint, and has got a great watercolorist. And for the moment, their names are escaping, so apologies if I've forgotten your name. But she's a lovely watercolor artist, and she's been on the show several times. She's been on it twice so far, and it'd be really great to see her in a more natural, her personal painting environment, and just to hear the conversation develop. I had to go last week. Last week was Russell Tovey, and I did a time lapse as I normally do, and I found the time lapse really helpful to see how my artwork develops as I produce it, and I sit back and reflect on the whole process. Now I can kind of condense the 4 hours that I do the painting into about a minute, so you can see it sort of speeded up, but I can see where I'm doing adjustments or see where I'm kind of being more hesitant, and it makes me kind of reflect back on my process and try and figure out why I'm having certain issues in certain parts of the process, or where certain parts of the process go well. It's important not just to analyze your artwork and find all the faults with it, but to analyze your artwork and find the strengths in it as well, because your strengths you can still build on, but you need to acknowledge some of your success in things. So it may be that you've worked on a portrait and the eye's gone really well, but the rest of the portrait's kind of faded, and you can build confidence knowing that you can get a certain amount of realism in one part, something that you're enjoying in the portrait that works well, and try to see what made it work well and expand that to areas that maybe didn't. So it might be down to the fact that you've got the observation of the eye really well, you've got the shape, the beginning shape of it down really well, and you just need to apply that to the whole of the picture and take the pressure out of, oh, I can do one eye but I can't do the other. Well, if you can do one, you can do the other. It's just maybe that the pressure you're starting to build up in your head about, oh, I can't get them to match, or I can't get them on the same axis, and one eye looks like it's looking over here, one eye looks like it's looking over there. I hear this an awful lot in conversations about art, and I think it's important to take the balance where if you can find a success in one element of your artwork, it's to try and see that if you can do something well in one area, you can actually do it in others. It's to then try and analyse why it maybe didn't go quite so well in other areas, and maybe that you've just rushed a couple of steps, and maybe that you just didn't spend that time in mapping out where things are, location, about where you place another object like an eye, like if you've got one eye done and you've got to place the other eye. Now, I do my work slightly differently. I try to map out the big block area of the entire thing, so I don't get too focused down into the minutiae of the portrait too soon. And it's a similar process if I was doing a landscape. You know, the big things will be, say, for example, very basic. If it's a tree on a horizon, is, well, where's the sky and where's the ground? Where does the tree go? And I'll play around with the composition of that first on my picture frame to figure out where these things lie. And I can play around and I can blow the tree up so it's really large in the frame, or make it really, really small. I can play around with the horizon line and decide, well, if I put the horizon up here, I've got this huge, great foreground, and I'll give it a certain emotion or feeling. Or if I had it really low down, you know, that big expansive sky over the top of it, how would that look? And I can play around with the composition a little bit. Now, as I'm working from a copy, working from a picture today, I'm doing a copy of a picture that is already produced. There's certain elements of composition which are already decided for me, so I'm not having to dig it. But even with this, I've still decided to go a little bit closer and crop out some of the whiteness on the left hand side. I've brought his head in closer, so his hairline, say for example, comes very close here, where there is actually more of it maybe to the picture frame, or there's a greater expanse of his body that I've kind of brought his head up, so I'll lose some of the detail and information from maybe the right hand side and from the bottom area. I can still make small compositional changes. I'm not doing a perfect like for like copy. I'm taking inspiration from what I'm looking at, and I'm cropping it down to the size of paper that I have and the space I've got to draw it in, and I'm finding a happy medium about what suits my preferences to what is my resource. You're still a filter as an artist. You can still decide what best suits you and how you can put it into your artwork. So you're in control of it, basically. The key point is, don't cheat yourself. Don't miss things out because it'll be easy. So say for example, I have a fear of not drawing both eyes the same, so I'll crop all of my pictures so there is only one eye in it. That's kind of avoiding the issue and hiding from it rather than confronting it and trying to develop develop your skills to combat that. So you then are not scared of doing a face with two eyes on it. You see what I mean? I often find where people have a problem with drawing hands, they'll put the hands behind the back, or they'll make them look like they've got their hands in their pockets, or they'll crop the frame of the picture off to the waist because they can't draw legs or can't draw feet, and they'll use that as a kind of an excuse, but they'll artistically give you a good reason why they're doing it. But what I say is, you're only cheating yourself. You're only denying yourself the pleasure of having that scope of deciding with honesty what it is you leave out and what it is you want to put in because of the artistic content, rather than I won't put that in because I can't do it. What I'll say to you is, drawing hands, feet, noses, ears, mouths, whatever it is you've got a hang up about, it's just a fear. Because if you can draw a basic shape, you can draw all of these elements. You can break it down stage by stage. So it's to remove some of that fear. But when you're doing the portrait, stand back, reflect and analyze. Okay, I know that I haven't got a likeness. So what is different about my likeness to my resource? Is his face too thin? Have I made his eyes too wide? Often I find as well that when people are doing things like portraiture, they'll try and make it look directly at the screen, whereas the portrait that you might be doing is somebody in three-quarter view, like this one we're doing today. But what will happen is they'll do the head and they'll do the big form in three-quarter view, but when it comes down to the eyes, they'll make the eyes look straight forward because it's almost hardwired into their head about proportions, about eyes going in the middle and the level. So where his head is turned to a three-quarter view looking out in this direction, he's not looking out straight, he's looking out that way. What tends to happen is we tend to then align the eyes so they're looking out directly towards us, but on a head that's facing out in a different direction, and that can throw you. What we need to observe is, because his head's tilted, proportions tilt along with it. Now that might sound obvious, but it's a very easy trap or cul-de-sac to get into, where we start rendering eyes as closely as we can looking towards us, and then we have to make the nose do that and the mouth do that. And you can imagine if that mouth then started to look towards us directly, it would shift, and his nose would shift, and his eyes would shift, and his eyes would then look too far over to this side of his head, and there'd be too much of a cheek on space on that side. So all these kind of little things that will kind of trip us up as we go along in the portrait, and that's why a lot of likenesses are not the same as the resource images, is because we've tried to straighten up the image, tried to straighten the face to look directly forward, and the head's looking to the left. We do it subconsciously. Our brain is kind of hardwired. So I have a slip of my coffee. Those who know me, I have my morning coffee, and I've even got my lovely coffee warmer this morning with Lee on it that Andrea lovely knitted for me and embroidered. It's my go juice. I definitely need one after the hassles I've had with the computer this morning. So all of these elements of portraiture, we are more attuned to seeing errors. If you're drawing a tree in a landscape, You know, if you miss the leaf off, nobody's really going to know. If you get the basic shape of a tree, people will identify it as a tree. They might even like how you've painted it. It might be the expressive textures that you've put onto it, and they might just love the colours that you've used. But they wouldn't be too critical of it, as in, oh, I think you'll find that particular tree has 25 leaves on that particular branch, and you only painted 24. But when it comes to a face, because we're so hardwired into looking at faces from birth, we'll immediately know there's something not quite right. We might not be able to put a finger on it, but there'll be something about the face which would just bug us as either a viewer or as an artist of creating it. You'll look at it and go, this is not quite right and I can't see it. At that point, take a break. Move away from it, have a look, go and do something else for 5 minutes and then come back to it and see it afresh. And 9 times out of 10 you'll see the immediate area that's not quite right. You can take a photograph of it. That's often another good way of seeing it objectively. You can turn it upside down. You can look at it in the mirror. Any way of seeing your artwork from a different perspective will help you see some of the areas that you need to change to make it the portrait that you want it to be. And that's why I always say, when you're starting drawing, draw lightly, draw loosely, so you're not being too definite and prescriptive about things. You can allow your mark making to find the shape. And literally it is a case of making a mark at the top and the bottom and going, is that too high or too low? If it's too high, move it down. If it's too low, move it up. And it simplifies the process and takes some of the fear away of being perfect first time with every first stroke. Now naturally, as you progress with anything, you will tune your eye and you will tune your hand into making more accurate marks to begin with, so you're not having to move so much around. But even in this portrait, I will still get the basic structure right as closely as I can visually by my eye, just by judging backwards and forwards, but I will leave enough scope in which to move things around a little bit. So if I haven't got quite the dark as the right place, I can move that this way, I can rub it back down. I got to a stage last week I was fairly happy with the structure of it, and then I started to tone it in very quickly and loosely, just by playing around with some of the very darks and the mid-tones and where the light areas are. Now I need to go into this further and deeper to get it to be a good representation of the image that I'm working on. And as I'd say, you're trying to replicate a mark that was done with certain what are called bravura, certain confident marks. He's wisped the rubber or white chalk to create highlights or put definite big black lines in. He's a confident artist, but he will have made marks to kind of build up the structure first to put that confident mark down. And as we're starting to replicate the image, we're starting to have to kind of map it out first, but also replicate a line that is very confident. So if we have a look at his shoulder there, as it comes down, my head's in the way, as it comes down there, it's very definite. And on this reference picture, it's a very crisp line, and it's almost done with the side of a piece of charcoal, literally in one go like that. Now as we're doing it, we're kind of being a little bit more tentative, but to actually put down that whole mark, we need to be more expressive at that point. So it's identifying the qualities of the marks and how are we going to get them. I did mention that we did Sky Portrait, and I did a portrait of Russell Tovey last week, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I got my paints out. I painted last week. I had a lovely canvas. It was a raw canvas with a clear gesso over the top. Normally you get canvases with a white gesso, but with a clear gesso you actually saw the beige colour of the linen that was underneath. And it's a linen board, it's not a sort of a canvas on a frame. And I quite liked it because my drawing board has a certain amount of flex to it, but the drawing board itself that you paint on gave a nice resistance as well, a nice harder surface, so you could push harder with the brush. And what I found is, because there was a give in my easel, I had the nice combination of working on something that was quite robust but had a bit of bounce to it because of my easel. Now I could make my easel a little bit stiffer so it didn't bounce quite so much. I was using oil paints, but you'll see the process that I used is very similar to how I paint. Mapping it out, blocking out the bigger shapes, looking at tone. Then I started to build up the colour. So I've got that time lapse video. I'll put it up. It lasts about a minute, and when it's done, we'll pop back and we'll get started on this portrait. So for the meantime, enjoy this. So there we go. Let's say it's only a minute long, but you can see how that portrait is built up. I've got a picture here of the finished thing, which I'll click and show. Hopefully, how's it gone? It's disappeared. Hang on a second. Oh, it's gone. Oh well, it's gone. I'm not going to fiddle around with my computer too much this morning because I had enough problems with it, and technically I am just a one-man band, so I don't have a team of people behind me fixing and sorting out all these issues. But you saw from the video there how it developed from beginning to end. The process was kind of adjusting and moving things around a little bit by little bit by little bit, going back in, painting over, changing. I noticed a lot through that video that I was kind of moving and manipulating the nose around a little bit, because where I placed it was too high and moved it down, and moved too low, and then put it back up, and then it was too wide and moved it back in again. But what I was doing was bouncing where that location should be against other elements that I was happy with. So the structure and placement of the face, and maybe the structure where the ears were, and where the location of where the eyebrow ridge was, and the eyes and the eye shapes. I then could see that the nose wasn't quite right, and there was something wrong. It was drifting too far over to the left, and drifting too far over to the right, and drifting too far up and too far down. And it was a bit like, you know, you try to put the tail on the donkey, and you can look at it when you're just going all over the donkey until you identify the area that it should be, and then you kind of go, oh, it's too low, maybe too high, oh, that's where it goes. And it's at that point where you know where it is, you don't have to worry about the location anymore. You've got the structures in the right place, you've got the positioning in the right place, and then you can start to build up your rendering of the surface. And it's often that when we're doing the portrait, we'll want to jump to the rendering almost to get it finished and done, because the pressure's built up so much in ourselves that what is a pleasurable experience about creating a piece of artwork becomes the tension of getting it right. And if you muck it up, it's a waste. It's never a waste of time. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. It's okay. There's no piece of paper you can turn on the page. You've learnt an awful lot from it, and you can apply it to the new portrait and the next drawing and the next drawing, and you build up your skill set. It's very hard to come to art, never having done it much before, and being perfect straight away. The chances are that you're not, or even if you were, to replicate that success is very, very difficult unless you're naturally tuned. And there are some people out there who have got the a natural eye ability of applying what they see to the page very effortlessly. Other people like myself have to work at it, but there's still a point where I will meet that capability with them. And as I've learnt and built up my skill set, I actually build more tools into my artistic practice than somebody who just has a natural ability. If you don't work at your natural ability, it will just hit a plateau as well. And most good artists are always trying to push themselves about their experience, and through that pushing themselves, you actually make a mistake or muck things up occasionally, and that's okay. That's how we learn what areas we need to develop, what areas we need to concentrate on, or slow down, or not to get too hooked up on about. So if I got hooked up on the likeness and I got a fear of not getting the likeness, and that makes me hesitant, that might trip me up into actually creating the portrait. So I just want to say to yourself, give yourselves a break. Don't beat yourself up when things go bad. It's okay. It's part of the process. Just try and identify it. If you're not too sure what went wrong about it, this is an ideal place to come and chat. Come and talk about it. Ask a question about the issues that you're having with it. So, as I say, when you join chat, do say hello so I can see you there. Bajol, hello, good morning, afternoon. How much time did it take? The portrait of Russell Tovey took 4 hours. This was a couple of hours last week, but as you see, I do an awful lot of chatting and talking and not much drawing and sketching, but which I'm going to do now. So I've got my image up in front of me. I'm going to start drawing it on this. If you've got any art related questions, ask. You work on a portrait as well. There's issues that you're having with your work, pop them up in the chat. This is like an art demonstration and more of a conversation as well. I've even got my coffee. So if you've got a favourite beverage there, chat away. So it's a friendly space. I do have quite a few people who normally join us, but I was late getting started today because of my computer. So some of those people have to go on and get on with real life outside of the internet world. So I know that some of them can't make it after a certain time. What I'm going to do here is I'm quite happy with the location and everything. I'm not going to work into too much detail. I'm just going to build up some of the tone that I've got there. I'm using a pan pastel with charcoals. So this is the pan pastel, and I put it on with a little applicator made by a company called Soft, S-O-F-T-T. It has these lovely spongy pads which you can dip into the pan pastel and apply to the drawing, and it gives you a wonderful dense black. I'm going to be using charcoal as well, so I have a range of charcoal pencils. It's nighttime in India. Oh wow. So yeah, it's great to see that people have joined from all around the world, and thank you so much for joining. It means it's reaching out there, so you're quite welcome to share this with friends, build a little community of people up. You can, if you've got other artist friends, you can say, right, it's Saturday night, let's get round, watch it all together, have a question, have a conversation about artwork as well, what you like, what you don't like, what are you finding working well in your artwork, what do you find difficulties with, and here's a good place to have a chat about it. So you're more than welcome to share that as well. So I'm looking at my image. You might see my head bop backwards and forwards. I'm going to try and move out of the camera shot a little bit so my big face isn't in the way, so you can see the drawing. I can see that this whole area, where I've got a lot of white down here, it's kind of blocking my eye a little bit. I know that this whole area is toned, so I need to put that tone in a little bit. Where it's heavy and I'm quite sure where things are, I can put a heavier charcoal pastel down, and where it's lighter, I can allow that pastel to kind of fade out. It's just a pressure that I'm putting on the charcoal, but I'm actually going to continue it all the way up. I do think that this part of his head does need to come in a little bit as I'm looking at that, and I might put a heavier darker line just to try and denote where that edge of his neckline is on his jumper. Spin that around. As you can see when I'm drawing, I'm not using the very tip with like a tripod grip. I often call that a tripod grip because you try to hold onto your pencil or your drawing with 3 fingers. I'm holding it further back, one, so I can get a better perspective of the picture as a whole, but also when I apply it I have a greater sense of freedom, so there's more movement to my arm. If I'm used to using the tip of it, my arc of movement is limited to my wrist, whereas if I'm holding it further back, I have greater expanse of movement, so I can get free movement down. I can see bigger shapes as well. As I say, this whole area is toned, and I can see how that comes out of his shoulder there, and this is all toned. It's a lighter tone here, so I'm going to be a little bit lighter with my application just to build this area up. I can see where there's a dark shape that comes in about here. It's a little bit heavier. I can put more powder in there. I'm just indicating at the moment. I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but I do want to block out some of this white page because it's starting to glare, and I want to start to build up some of the tonal aspects of the face. So having a large white space actually plays a trick on your eye, where if you've got a camera and you've got the aperture fully open, and you put it towards the light, everything is white. It's very hard to see. And then if you immediately look at, or if you spend time looking at the light area, eventually you can see some detail because your eye starts to adjust to it. But then if you looked at immediately at a dark area, everything would be very, very dark. So think of it like a dark room. You walk into a dark room, it takes you a while for your eyes to adjust, for the iris to open up, for the pupil to open up, so you can see more light, to see some detail. It's very similar to your page as well. If you're looking at a light area all the time, it starts to play tricks with your eye to suggest that other areas are darker because there's so much white. But then when you have so much darkness, you start to see subtleties in it. The white is glaring. You might feel like you might have to take it down a little bit. So it's playing with the lights and the darks basically with tone. I know this is darker than it's going to be, so I'm not going to worry about that. I just want to block in as much of that really white space as possible. Now you can see from my reference picture on the screen there, there's more of like a light shadow which coming through, and that's actually where I took a photocopy from the book itself, just so I could have my book in a different place and it wasn't on a camera screen. But that's the sheen of the paper. Now it adds some nice little elements to it. In the book itself, it is quite dark, and there's an element of shoulder that comes right the way across, and it's kind of bleached out a little bit by that highlight coming through. But it almost adds like a sunbeam effect, and I quite liked it, so I might actually leave that in still. So I've got left at this area which is a bit lighter, which comes down to here. This whole area, this whole thing is dark, so I'm just going to block this in really lightly, really loosely. I just getting rid of that white page. I know when I come to do this later that I will be spending more time putting more charcoal down to make it really, really dense. There's some wonderful elements to this area where I know now where I've got this mark. There's like another dark area here, like a little channel which comes back up this way, and this little area here, and this area is darker, and when it comes out there's a highlight here, and coming up behind his head there's areas that are in shadow which come right down. And putting this shadow in the background with any highlights that I've got, like the highlight in his hair, etc., it helps to push the light forward. If we put black or dark areas down, it tends to recede into the background, and then any white areas really pop, really stand out further forward. So it's about getting that tonal balance. Now, as I say, this is just the first suggestion of where that tonal balance is, and I can build on it as I go. But for the moment, I just want to get rid of the white, because there is no white in this whole area. So there's no point having it glaring at me as I'm doing the portrait. This will help me find the lighter areas in the portrait, face and hair itself. If I turn these down a little bit. There's some lovely wispy hairs as well. I don't know if you see it on the right hand side of his head. These kind of wispy hair, like one or two strands just picked out with a white chalk pencil. Normally done right at the very end, towards the end of the portrait. They're okay to help you find location of other things, so you can say, okay, the hair comes out to here because it's that far away from the eye, so that gives me helps with the location of, maybe you can triangulate. You can go from that white hair that comes out here, is that far away from that eye and that far away from the beard, and you can help judge the space that way. But for the moment, I'm not even going to think about it. I'm just going to stick to the big shapes. So this triangle shape of hair that comes down the back, I'll leave that alone. I know how far it comes down. It comes down to where his shoulder then goes out this way. So this whole area is dark. I'll get rid of it that way. So I'm leaving in the element of this white triangle for the back of his hair. Now his shoulder comes down at a slight curved angle this way, but I can see the thickness of that dark area fades out into the light, so I've got to be careful how I put that down, because I know this is curved. There's just a slight bend to it. There's no sharp line there like there would be, say for example how I've done this curve of his top. This area here is quite faded out because there's so much shadow there. Light's coming in from this direction, striking his head and casting a shadow on the rest of his body. So it's a cast shadow we're looking at. And I can see that this area is slightly darker than what I have it. So I'm just going to lightly pull that pastel over and fill this whole space out. Now a little bit of pastel goes a long way. You can see I've not really dipped in too much, but I can start to see under his chin it's a lot darker, and these are almost connected darknesses, so tap a little bit more on there and let that come right the way across, and it fades into the top. You see how that top doesn't go right round in a U shape into his chin. In the picture we can't see where it just kind of disappears into the darkness. So sometimes when we're doing a picture we'll assume, oh, this is a curved crew neck top, a curved shape, and we'll do the curved shape because we know it's there all the way up to the chin. But when we actually look at the resource, looking at the picture, we can't see it. So you have to do that thing where it's a kind of a cliche to say, but it's very true. Draw what you actually see, not what you think you see. So we might think we see a whole crew neck of a t-shirt because we know what the shape is, and we might want to put that in. But what we actually need to put in is what we're looking at, what we see. So this whole area is dark, and we can build this up with a lovely uniform darkness using a pan pastel. You can use charcoal as well to do this. You just build it up in layers. It's quite quick and immediate. It's a lovely kind of painterly process. Now, I know we're using a dry medium, but you'll hear that an awful lot where people are saying it's a very painterly process. He draws very painterly, and it doesn't mean to say he's dipped his pencil or his charcoal in water and sloshed it all over his page. It's just there's a freedom and flow of movement, and I think that's what they're trying to express when they say painterly. As opposed to if you're just using pencil, it's all about drawing. You can actually draw with paint, and how people analyze and draw and mark out, and very deliberate. It's a more analytical style of process of painting. You know, a lot of people will do underpainting and draw with the paint first, map out where everything is. You know, then block areas in, and then layer up the paint on top of that. That's kind of the process that I used when I was painting Russell Tovey in that time lapse. So say if you can have a look on Instagram and have a look at that hashtag, what's really good is there are lots of people of all different stages in their art experience. You know, there's some professionals there, there are some hobbyists, so very good hobbyists, very good amateurs. Some people just starting out, you know, hitting some of the difficulties that you might be facing yourself, you know. And what I say is, it's great to share information, it's great to share knowledge. So if somebody is highlighting something that they're having difficulty with and you have found a solution with it, you know, share it with them. I wouldn't necessarily be too critical over somebody else's artwork on a format like that, because it might come across like you're being a bit mean. I only offer criticisms to work if they're being sought by people, and whenever I do deliver a criticism, it's not to pull their work down, it's actually to find a solution for them and to help them. So it's what they call a positive criticism, where you go, I guess I can see you're having problems with tone, have you thought about trying this? You know, it's acknowledging that they've got an issue with something and you can see it and you're trying to help them, rather than just going, your portrait's rubbish, it's not very good. That doesn't help anybody, and it can actually stop people from learning and pushing their artwork forward, because it can be demoralizing, and that's not what we're about. It is about building up people's confidence in their abilities. I'm the same. If somebody who I saw as a very good artist came up and went, oh, that's rubbish, and didn't offer me any constructive criticism on how I could improve my work, I'd be pretty demoted. You know, I might go, oh, maybe I should just concentrate on pencils, or maybe I shouldn't bother anymore. Now, you know, it's very easy to be put off by certain things, so be careful on how you uh, give criticism. I say I only give it if it's sought by people. If people go in and what do you think, you need to take a holistic view of it and see where they are in their art process. They're not going to be Rembrandt if they're just starting out. They have to build up their art practice, but for somebody who's starting out, it might be very good. And you can put it in that way. You can say, well, how long have you been doing? How long have you been doing art? I've been only doing it for a couple of months or a couple of years even. But I really enjoy it, and to go, well, it's great that you're enjoying your artwork. Well done. And that bit of encouragement helps them carry on doing their artwork, which eventually means they're going to improve. And in a few years' time, you might be looking at some amazing portraits, and you're getting the benefit of that rather than putting people off. So it's about a certain amount of honesty. If you don't think something is particularly good and they're saying it's amazing, you don't have to write anything back. You can quietly disagree. It's about learning how difference of opinions are important in artwork, because different way people look create different artworks. So their main focus might be to express something. What's interesting about the Sky Portrait Artists of the Year was you get a lot of different artists drawing the same subject matter, but their responses are all different. It's the same person, the same conversations that we listen to, but their responses are all different, because visually they're answering their own artistic quest about what it is they like, what it is they don't like, what they're expressing, what mediums they love to use, what they find comfortable, and it's not always the same for everybody. So where we maybe have a preset preference for certain materials or certain processes, or we have a certain outlook on artwork and what we think is good or bad, it's interesting to see other people's point of view. You don't necessarily have to agree with them, but you can respect them. The TV show itself is always really interesting. It always creates a good debate about art, and that's what I like about the program. Is that sometimes the judges will choose an artwork which you don't necessarily think it would have been in your top three, but yet to them it's had so much merit in it. It's actually won that session or section, and that starts the conversation going about, well, what is it they saw, and what is it I didn't see? Is there something in there that I'm missing? Is there a certain aspect to that artist that I hadn't acknowledged or looked at before? And it can make you reevaluate your prejudices over what is good and bad art. It's very subjective. It's very much a personal thing, I feel, and it can come from a whole different gamut of reasons why you think what art is good. It might be how you were taught in school. It might be from a social economic background. It might be coming from a timeline in history. So if you think back to, if you were brought up in the 50s and everything was quite jazzy and everything was experimental, and there was a whole breakout of new different formats, or if it's contemporary art where you're looking at how artists will use other craftspeople to create their artwork for them. So it's about the conceptual art, about how the idea is important from the artist, how it's facilitated by other artisans for that artist is almost secondary. So it doesn't necessarily mean the artist has to make it themselves. And this is quite true in a lot of art history. That if you look at some of the greatest artists that were known of art history, they will have had apprentices do certain things for them. It doesn't mean to say that that wasn't that artist's work, because it was that artist's vision that helped the artwork come about. If it wasn't for that artist, it would have never been made. And what they're doing is going, sometimes I don't have that particular skill set to do this particular aspect of, say, sculpture, but I know I want this so I can carry on with the rest of it. So Bernini would have used people to do certain elements for him. Roughing out, for example, would have taken so much time, so he could have almost like a much more prolific way of working, where he would have had a huge block of stone. Well, there's no point in me spending weeks and weeks and weeks chipping away at this stone. I really want to be getting on with the refinement of the figure. So I'll mark out where I want you to out, and you carry on with it. Doesn't mean to say that isn't anyway a lesser artwork of Bernini's. His artistic vision is the one that's directing it. So when we're looking at conceptual art, we can sometimes be overly critical because it's of today. That we go, oh, that artist didn't do it. He got that, he paid a bunch of interns to do it. No, there's a balance, of conceptual idea and skill. I think there's a real warmth to artists who have both, um, and a certain respect to the level of skill and also artistic fortitude to be able to balance and manipulate what they can physically do with media into something that becomes, I think, other. The artwork itself, what becomes artistic, if you like. Now, it's just my point of view. You can have a different point of view if you like. I'm always up for a good art debate because I like to hear people's different points of view over what it is that interests them, what they find stimulating when it comes to art. Now, what I would say is I try to stay open as possible to artworks. I can, over a period of time, because I've looked at so much art and done a bit of it myself, start to fine tune my reaction to what I think is good in a piece of artwork, and what I think is a bit not so interesting. And it's often not necessarily specific to art genre, but it's also to do with attitude of the artist and how they've perceived their artwork, or how they've talked about it, or what their intention was of the artwork. So sometimes I see a good visual image, but it doesn't necessarily make it a good piece of artwork. So I might see a painting of a face which looks beautiful, and it's almost like the artist is just on autopilot, and they're just turning out beautiful looking faces, but there's no artistic depth to it. Or I see abstract painters who will chuck out a prolific number of abstract works, but there'll only be one or two of them that have really captured my eye, because the rest of them are just done as a process. And I think there's balance to that, where it shouldn't just be process led. I'm kind of teaching how-to bits and pieces of what I'm doing technically, but artistically, you need to feed it as well. You need to have a concept or a narrative as to why you're producing the artwork. What is it about this artwork? Why are you creating it? Why are you drawing it? What is it answering in your own mind? And I think if you can honestly answer that question, it naturally comes out in the artwork that it becomes naturally more engaging for an audience to look at, because there is content behind it. And it's very easy after a while to see artworks that don't have that level of investigation and of thought and of care and of passion and love of the process, or love of the development of the idea, and how it might initially start out to be one thing, and develop as they produce more work into something bigger. That's just interesting about artwork, that we might start off with a baseline about what we think we're doing, if I was doing a portrait of a person, what I think of that person and how I've tried to translate it. But as you go through the process of it, even sometimes with time after it's finished and created, subconsciously you've picked up on other elements which you put into the picture which you weren't aware of at the time. And that's interesting, how artwork can evolve over time, long past the last brushstroke that you put on it. Sometimes artworks have almost a history of themselves after they're done, and they take on a notoriety, or they have a certain cachet because of their fame or whatever. So I'm thinking of things like Mona Lisa, where if you have a look at that picture, the almost myth-based stories that are based around it, or the history of it and what happened to it in certain periods of time, since well past the time that Leonardo da Vinci created it, it adds elements to it which you were not aware of, which you couldn't have possibly thought, or he couldn't have possibly thought of it when he created it. He wouldn't have known it. Somebody tried to shoot it with a shotgun, or it was going to be stolen by somebody and then found and retrieved. It wasn't how it was kind of hidden away or lost during certain periods of history, and who had it, and all that the provenance adds to the mystique of the picture as well. It becomes almost like a folklore of an artwork. And again, that's not necessarily the intention of the artist. It's just where an artist has captured the imagination of people, it's become something else. It's become something other, well past the likeness of the person. So, where people have romanticized the enigmatic smile, the question over who is it? Is it male? Is it female? Is it Leonardo da Vinci himself? This is a picture he carried around with him the whole of his life. So why did he carry that one picture around? It allows you to play into the idea. Hi Alex, you couldn't find me earlier. That's because I wasn't here. Alex, I apologise to everybody in advance, well, post starting the podcast, because I had a terrible problem with my computer this morning. One of those things. So sorry if you joined me a wee bit late. I know that I'm going to keep on running because I started late because of this stupid computer this morning. For some reason, just decided not to work, and I had a bit of a problem about an hour or two in trying to sort it out. But I'm glad to say I am back. So good to have you here. Good to see your friendly face. It means that the room is probably going to be a little bit quieter than normal. So yeah, apologies for that. How's your week been? Are you drawing? Are you painting? What are you working on? How's your lockdown going? So lockdown is still a weird thing. The different. We're just going into a second lockdown again, which started yesterday here in Northern Ireland. So the restrictions are in place for certain things. But I think what it's really done is it's building up people's adaptability to kind of changing with what they can and can't do in certain times. I'm going to lightly cover that. I'm going to try and get that little bit of misty light coming through. Again, that's from the photocopy, not from the image itself, but I quite like that kind of beam come down. I've got a beam over here, it's actually here, so I'm going to bring that in a little bit. Nope, and darken this whole area down. So as you can see, we're still working on the images we were working on from last week. I did start to play with it a little bit and thought, well, no, we can leave this till for this week. Yes, computers are awesome when they work. I mean, this is great really when you think about it. 10 years ago, would I be able to have an art conversation with a bunch of people on the internet in different parts of the world? Pajawal, who was in here earlier, is from India. We're in different parts of Northern Ireland. There's people from the UK join occasionally. People from Dublin, Angela. You tried pencil drawing this week. Did you sneak one of Jon Snow, who'll be on tomorrow? Yeah, cool. Yeah, Jon Snow, the newsreader, not Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, because I think that may have thrown a lot of people who aren't from the UK and know that he is an amazing journalist. So they'll just say that next week is Jon Snow. They're going, oh, Kit Harington, woo! They're probably going off doing sticky pictures of him at the wall fighting a dragon or something. But yes, no, it is the Jon Snow of Channel 4 fame. Channel 4 News. Yeah, should be interesting. I mean, I'm sure he's got some stories to tell. Again, it's great to watch somebody else's process in the real. Like you're kind of watching me do this, but watching an artist kind of have that conversation and create something is always an interesting experience. I really liked the conversation last week with Russell Tovey. There's some great, because he does a great art podcast as well. It's well worth checking out. I put a link to it on my Instagram page under his picture. And he does get to see the great and the good in the art world, but also there's a real passion for art there as well. It's not just something he's kind of faked or made up. He's got a real inquisitive hunger and thirst for artwork, which is kind of inspiring in itself just to listen to, because there's that kind of wonderment. But why'd you do this and why'd you do that? And this is ask sort of questions that you want to ask, but might be too afraid to ask. And a lot of art programs and things that we might see on TV can be very deferential to artists and their genres and stuff. And there's almost like I don't want to say childlike, but a very honest questioning style that he has about how some of the questions that he'll put across are innocent in their way but are really relevant. And sometimes simple questions are the best questions because it really forces people to kind of maybe think about what it is they do. So yeah, I was really interested in the conversation about it. Interesting conversation about art college and about them teaching students. And the interesting response was from the artist who was in there last week was, unfortunately, your internet usually collapses totally on a Sunday, so you just grab a screenshot and try 4 hours. Oh, but I don't know if you have Sky TV, but they do actually put it on. I think it's the last hour of it, so it'll be from about 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock on the Sky Arts channel. If you've got Freeview, you can watch it on that as well. You don't necessarily have to have Sky. But they do the live broadcast of the last hour on television as well. So yeah, the conversation last week is about how in art college you're not necessarily taught how to do certain things, which sounds shocking. And the artist there was kind of saying, well, we just kind of I just got to art college, just locked away in a room for 3 years and told to get on with it. And there is an element to that, and there is a good case for it, and because it really does push you to explore your own artistic endeavors and thoughts and processes. But there is the security of having other peers in the same process, all learning and bouncing ideas off of each other. However, my caveat to that is there are other universities and colleges out there who do teach both. They can teach the technical side of how to hold a brush, which is something that Russell was talking about, or how to mix paint, or how to play with colours, the theory of colour, how it can mark make and what does that mean, construction and composition. And it's not often with modern art colleges that I've seen, there's not a laziness in the teaching because there's a lot of dedicated tutors out there. Sometimes it's time. They don't have time to get to go in depth with all of their students because they just don't have that one-to-one time with them. So you are kind of left to the devices of you have to explore and develop and push your learning yourself. And it's a good lesson to learn because once you come out of art college, there's nobody there backing you up. If you've learned that skill, it's incredibly useful. But I think there's an element where we need to also do the teaching side of the technical in balance with the supportive network for the artistic. So the balance of both, I think, that's kind of needed. And I'm seeing that a bit in the Atelier system where they're teaching a lot of technical, but they're starting to come around the idea that the concept is important as well. The delivery of something is important. You've got the skills to do it, we've taught you the skills to do it, but artistically you need to be taught those skills as well. I need at least 4 hours, but it doesn't improve it. Yeah, well, do you know what? I quite like the fact that you have all week to do your portrait on Portrait Artist of the Week. You don't have to do it in 4 hours. You can spend your time. It's not cheating. I quite like to see, later on in the week where people have really spent their real length of time in working their portrait into being something masterful or really considered about why they've done certain processes, of why they've replicated an image in a certain way, which is interesting, other than just the 4 hour quick response. Me, I technically do it as a challenge for myself, almost going back as a falling down moment I had in my own approach to doing the show, that I just failed miserably in doing it in 4 hours, and I couldn't figure out why. So when I came back, I kind of really evaluated my process and what I did, and I redid the portrait that I did on the day, and I did it in 4 hours, and then I analysed why could I do it in 4 hours here and look 4 hours at home. So I kind of keep that challenge of 4 hours, but there's been one or two that I've kind of worked on a little bit longer. It's okay. You just not at the time, so don't Keep for a late start. I won't have too much time. Oh, don't worry. I'm going to keep on drawing for a little bit longer. I know, because I was like an hour late, so I kind of decided I'd carry on with portrait. I don't really want to work too much into it because I know people might have been interested to see how it developed, and I might catch up with the whole thing later. So I'm going to go a little bit longer. So I'm not, I don't see how I'm not going to maybe carry on to 6 or 7 o'clock at night doing it because I've got things to do as well. Yeah, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I do like that 4 hours of just sitting back and just listening to a conversation and working alongside other artists. Always a really nice community of people on Instagram as well, kind of the supportive aspect to people making comments on your artwork, or you making comments on their artwork and going, really love this. There's been 1 or 2 portraits of Toby this week which I really loved, and I really loved and really took inspiration from. And I think that's one of the nicest things about the whole process, is that you've been exposed to different artists doing different things, and it makes you reflect back on your work, not necessarily to copy their style, but it makes you think about your approach to certain things. And certainly with my approach to drawing, I'm noticing things that I'm doing now which I may have not been not necessarily brave enough, but certainly were elements that I wanted to develop and hadn't got round to, that through doing the process of the show, of doing the sky portraits, all your connections start to fade a little bit. Well, hopefully it stays with us. As I say, if you have to go, you disappear, that's cool. I get it, Alex, it's no problem at all. But if you're here, great. I'll keep on talking anyway. I think I was a gentleman called Pajawal who's on earlier, and I was chatting away to him and I didn't realise he'd left. So at the minute I'm still I've got structures down, but I'm kind of refining some of these structures and softening them, looking at where the darks and the lights are still, and finding out where the forms are, the shapes. Look at this, I can see how low this eye is, and I've got it a little bit too high, so I'm going to move this eye down a wee bit to there. I don't want to go into detail of it, but even making that small adjustment changes the attitude of that eye by just manipulating a simple shape without doing this fine detail into it. I can start to see this cheek having more depth to it, that this shadow is more definite going across here and is a little bit darker. So I can start to put some of those marks in, and how one mark translates into another mark. So when I see that's where that dark area is on his ear there, comes back over. All of this area is in shadow, so I'm going to put a little bit of charcoal over this area here. This is not as white as it was, so I'm going to put a little bit of charcoal over there. This is all down to pressure as well. If I press really hard with it, I'll get a darker mark. If I'm very light on the surfaces, I'm just tickling the surface, I will get a very dusty look to it. I can start to see where certain aspects of this mouth aren't quite right as well. So I'm going to have a tackle of this mouth. Maybe this nose is a little bit more wider than I've got it. So as this is in shadow, it comes down to there. This nose comes down to there, then comes back up, and then comes back down this way. And then comes back down this way. And then I get where the mouth line is, out that way. So I'm moving his mouth down a little bit from where I had it, because that's where that dark line is of that mouth going across. It's too far up, which means that there's a bigger shadow that I had, and the shadow was somewhere finishing there. It needs to come down this way a little bit. So I've moved his mouth down, the shadow needs to move down with it. I like where that edge of the nose is. Fill that whole area in. You can look at negative shapes like that white highlights of the triangle there, just capturing the lightness on the inside of his beard. So eventually, yeah, I will go into using charcoal pencils and go over the top and refine some of the shapes. Some of it I won't. I'll just leave to the expressive nature of using the pads or using a bit of tissue paper or using the rubber to carve into it to create some of those highlights. Because there's so much energy and flow to them, I could sit and render it the exact same with a pencil, but I think you lose some of the energy of the mark making. There's something I quite like, the dramatic marks that this has got, because it's a very dramatic image. It's lit like this guy is in a theatre producing, you know, it could be a stage performance of Hamlet or something. Now, it probably isn't, but it allows you to kind of read your own narrative into a picture, and that's what's interesting about art. When you look at it, what do you see? What do you bring to the table in your imagination? What do you feel from that picture? Everybody's response is going to be different. You know, you might look at that and just think, hey, he's a grumpy man, or he's fearful of something, or he's coming out from COVID for the first time after a year in lockdown. You know, it could be any number of things, because everybody's individual aspect of point of view is going to be unique. And it's always interesting to hear what people think about artwork. It's just we're a little bit scared, I think, to say what we actually feel and think, because we feel as though if we get it wrong, we're seen as being a bit, you know, oh, we don't know about art. Your opinion about things matters, so I like to encourage people to kind of really discuss them. So yeah, a long-winded way of saying yes, I will be using some pencil. I'm sure you're used to my long-winded ways anyway by now. So there's elements to this. It's starting to darken up a little bit. This whole area is a lot darker, so I'm just going to cover this in a bit. I'm going to block lightly this whole area. I'm not going to go black, but it's definitely darker. And what is quite a sculpture way of drawing, I can see where the tones are starting to come in from the back of the head here, which is a little bit darker, and come down and disappear into this blackness, and how they join together, and how from this area it gets a little bit lighter. Now it can look a bit bitty at the minute as I'm putting this charcoal on, but as I can soften it down with a brush and go back over it with a pencil, it'll uniform it and bring it together a little bit. If I put that sharper mark in just about there where that highlight is, that highlight isn't even white, it's, you know, there's charcoal in there now, but by darkening this area makes it look like a highlight, but not bright white, because it's light that's cascading and falling down. So as you go from your light source through the picture, the furthest thing away from that light source, even though it's in the light, will be slightly darker than the light source which is closest to the source. So, so the tip of the hair here where it's catching the light will be the lightest area, and it won't be on the edge, it'll be on the, because his head's a three-dimensional shape, it'll be on the sort of the crown at the top of the head here. Charcoal pencils different from lead pencils, or these interchangeable naming. No, charcoal pencils are different than graphite pencils. They're a different medium. You will get hard, soft, extra soft. You can get 2B, 3B. So the B range is still there in charcoal, but they're actually a different medium. I don't tend to mix them because they don't sit particularly well. It's the structure of graphite is very like plates that kind of flow and flop over each other, very slick, whereas the component of a charcoal is quite granular and they stick to one another. They're very loose and can roll over each other, but you've got to think about it this way. Your charcoal medium is like a bowl and the graphite medium is like a plate, and it'll just slide off and it won't adhere to each other. So I often see some people that have done a charcoal drawing and do pencil on top of it, and they're just adding elements here and there, pencil. Yeah, it's not a rule that you can't break. You can do it for certain effects, but generally, if I'm working with charcoal, I'll work with charcoal. You know, charcoal and pastel work very well together because they're of the same nature. but charcoal and pencil don't, and pastel and pencil don't. Pencil works very well with watercolors. Do layering watercolors over the top of it. If you're doing very heavy application of graphite, it doesn't work quite so well. So your light application of graphite works really well. Watercolors over charcoal has a different flavour to it. It comes off differently. I don't think it works particularly as well, but it works incredibly well with oil paint. So all these things are kind of interchangeable. You've got to try them out and see for yourself. See what you feel best suits. But as my initial kind of a bit of advice is, yes, don't mix charcoal and graphite together, because they don't mix particularly well. You can use white chalk and white pastel pencils with charcoal. You can use colour pastels with charcoal. You can use them in different ways. You can use them with brushes. You can use them with pads. You can use them with pencils. You can use them with the actual chalk itself to get certain marks. I think we're discussing that the charcoal mark that he has on his left-hand shoulder here is done with a bit of compressed charcoal, or it looks like compressed charcoal, and just drawn through very quickly. So I'm looking at textures and how he's got certain elements. He might have lent on the edge of his charcoal as he drew that down, so you've got a crisp edge with a very softer edge. But you get to play with them and see what these materials do. So don't be afraid of, just trying out a portrait, not for the sake of doing a wonderful work of art, but just an experimental portrait so you can figure out what materials are doing. A little dark bit on this side of his eye there, which caught my interest. Coming out and then down. As it comes down, it gets a lot lighter. So I'm going to, if you get too dusty on the surface, you can blow some away. This is a little kind of, you use it for cameras, blowing dust out lenses and things. But I just find sometimes when you blow on your page, a little bit of spit will come out of your mouth and land on the page, and it soaks in. And once you go over it with charcoal, it kind of makes that dark spot. This gets rid of it. You're literally just blowing air over it. You can get compressed air cans as well, which do the same thing, but it costs you a lot. This doesn't cost you anything. Well, buying it costs you something, but using it doesn't. It's also friendlier for the environment as well, because you're not using compressed gases. What I might do is just rub this pad into this whole area, just to take off some of this whiteness of this page. Pick up some of this and bring it down here. I said that this is one of those things that if you stare at the light for so long, you can't see the subtleties in the darkness. If you stare at the darkness for too long, you can't see the subtleties in the light. But I know that this area has tone in it. It's still light, but it's a little bit more grayer than I've got it, because as it becomes up here, you get the bounce against his hair. You can see that, how his hair is really light coming into this area because it's rubbed out back to the whiteness of the page. So this tells me this whole area has a texture of charcoal on it. So what you perceive as being light white isn't. Initially you look at this and go, that's a light area, this is a dark area, but as you look closely into it, you start to go, oh, the light area has actually got some dark in it, and the dark area actually got some light in it. There's a bit of contrast. So what I'm doing is just softening the image at the moment. I'm looking for key areas where I can see where certain marks work, and there's a shadow on the bottom of his chin. I'll pop that in just by blending some of that mark out. I can see how his cheek maybe come up a little bit more. Darken that corner of his eye a little bit. There's a wonderful sort of curved nature to the shadow over the forehead, which I quite like. So I'm following the action of how it curves around the side of his face, how it then goes into this dark area down here, which might be a bit low actually. Yeah, it might be a little tiny bit low. I'm not going to worry about it too much. How the hair comes back up into the darkness, so it disappears. This whole area is a lot kind of softer. I've got quite a few textures going on there with my application of the pad. Paz trying to escape. And this area of his hair is more uniform, so I know it needs to come back over this way a little bit. The darkness of that hair fades out into the darkness, so this whole area needs to be darker. This needs to be darker but more subtly. So I'm kind of breaking it down. You can see how more dramatic that's starting to feel. There's more definition starting to happen. He's starting to look a little bit more solid. I'm still not worried about definition of detail. I can render that back in. I still think I need to play around with these lips a little bit more, because where that shadow comes straight across, so it's all straight here, probably not as dark as that, as it comes across the side of his mouth and goes down a little bit. Get a better sense of that whole shape, and I think, yeah, it's more of an angle to that shadow on that nostril, which comes out. I know I need to clean up that point. It's like a little tiny V shape just in there. That might be a little bit too dark a line, but just emphasising the point. This shadow comes down, and what I might do is get rid of some of the, I just dabbed it in the pastel pan. It's very, very dark. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter than that. How that shadow breaks into this shape here for his nostril. You can hardly see, almost, you see from up here, the hook of his nose comes right out here and then down. And it's the illusion of this bit gives me the shape of the bridge of his nose. It's quite key because it gives me the illusion of where his nose drops down, very kind of like a Roman nose. On the picture itself, I can't quite see all of the detail of the other side of his nose, so I can't draw a line down the other side of his nose because I can't see it. I've got to let the light subtly suggest there's another side of his nose, because it comes and cascades down that side of his face. So how that shadow works is there's a highlight there, so a darker line which comes down this way and joins in to where the rest of his nose is. This is all the same shadow and tone. So one tone in some places blends into one another. Other tones in other areas are very contrasty. So this whole contrasty area here over his cheek, how defined his cheek is against his white moustache. But you see his nose disappears into the shape. It's kind of suggested where cheeks are with shadows, but there's no necessary line around them. There's a shadow of his hair, which shows up then the contour of the side of his face. It comes over then we give a little bit of a suggestion over his brow and his forehead. I'm still kind of mapping out if that's in the right place. I can see the shape cascades down from this point to this point, so I'm only going it so far. I'm still looking at the shadow cast rather than the detail of the site at the moment. This mark that I had up here needs to come down here. And that might have a knock-on effect to this eye, which it does. This eye still needs to come down a bit. It's very dark in there. I can start to see that his eye is a lot lower. So again, I don't want to play around with detailings too much too soon. I'm going to knock that right back, almost blend it in into its nothingness and build up that area. See a bit of a shadow there. Come straight down. I can go back in with the rubber and erase this area here, which I think is obviously not, it's lighter than that bit. So I can work back in with, say, a mono eraser just to lift an area off. So where that mark is, I can get rid of it and just sketch that line down. There's a highlight on the nose which is quite soft, where charcoal in there which makes it look too dark, so I'll lighten off this area. What I had here, going through the triangular area, very thin triangles, gives you the impression where his nostril is. This area of his nostril on this side is much sharper, and this is more pronounced. It's coming out. And I can almost get it in line with this eye, so I know it needs to come out a little bit more. It just helps widen and give space to that top lip. Helps me put in some of the shadows that I might have had problems placing before. So I'm just using my rubber really to sort of sculpt in elements of the marks. There's a lovely part here which comes out in a straight line. Now these marks aren't perfect, but what I'm doing is just lifting off some of that charcoal to give me a structural line, which helps me then find where this mark is. Going down this way. Now what I might do is use my brush just to blow in some charcoal over that, so it's not white. I can sort of sculpt back into it and play around with it a little bit more and change some of the shapes. I've got charcoal in there, brushing over it sometimes makes it a little bit lighter and softens it, and I can play around with some of the detail then on it. But he's starting now to have some depth to his face, which I kind of lost before. Now that still needs to be quite a bit darker actually. Bring that around, right the way around to where this top of his cheek is here. And from this point it goes there. Up. It's a bit dark at this base bit. You see that? But this is all in shadow. So his white hair in shadow isn't white. It's a toned down version of it. With the shadow in between those two white bits. The shadow then pops up from the corner here, comes up, almost meets this shadow, very lightly meets it, and there's like a striation of shadow which comes across this way. Look at the gap. And these kind of marks help give the illusion of texture of hair, but I'm actually drawing individual beard hairs. It's starting to build up the illusion of it. I can play around with that by building that up a little bit more. As you build something up, and I immediately go, oh, this is too dark, or that's too light. And you kind of bopping around and it's almost sculpting it three-dimensionally. You can see elements there working and other elements aren't. This eye, I think, where I've got it kind of going out too far, I'm going to bring it in and down. It might mean that his eye here comes in a little bit, but I think that's okay. I was given the angle of his eyes there looking out. This helps me locate where I might put the pupils in later, but it certainly helps shallow some of the issues I had with the design, where gaze was going. Shadow that whole area again, be more definite with this mark here. That comes out there. I'll load this map a little bit. I can work back in and play around lightening some of these areas as well, put some textual elements into them. I don't give them some sort of early Ozzy Osbourne eyeliner, but I'm just looking at how similar the marks and tones I've got are a little bit too light, so I'm just darkening them down a little bit. I can see where marks go that I can soften. So this mark might come in, so I can work over that with a bit of a rubber. Yeah, some of these angle marks of his forehead are lovely because they really help me kind of give certain structural lines to his forehead. So I'm not drawing a line that I perceive as a line or a wrinkle in the forehead, but I'm just placing little marks, and that's enough almost to suggest it. Not sure if this will get through, but buffering for the last 5 minutes, so I'll go now, thankfully. Alex, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very, very much indeed. We're coming up to 4:45. I'm going to stop about 6 o'clock, so going for the next 15 minutes. Again, my apologies for it being late this morning, but at least we managed to get a couple of hours in. So if you are watching on catch up, hello. Let's say my apologies for not being there live with you today, although I am live when I'm recording this. I'm going to continue this portrait next week as well. I think it's a good kind of expressive portrait to kind of pick up on and learn with. Great book. So again, I'll put the link to that book up quickly, just if you haven't caught it already. It's good to share it. So I'll pop that up now, which is How to Draw Portrait in Charcoal by Nathan Fox. You can buy it on Amazon. You can get it probably from any good bookshop. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can get it from there as well. When you click the link, it'll take to Amazon. You can buy it. I'll get a small affiliate payment back. You don't pay any extra. It's just a little kind of share affiliate scheme that I've got. As I say, this is all done for free, so any bit of money I can do that comes literally back into producing more content. If you've got any questions art-wise, fire them down in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and you get a notification when I go live. So if you're waiting for me to go live at 2 o'clock and I'm not there, you'll get a notification when I'm live. But generally it's 2 o'clock every Saturday. I've done this every week since beginning of Aprilish time because of COVID. I do miss my real life drawing classes, drawing classes with people, but this has been fun because I get to share the whole kind of experience with an awful lot more people. You'd be surprised how many people watch this through the week and then later on, and it's kind of been snowballing and building, which has been great. Been a lot of fun. What I say to you is I also did a thing this week called Figure This. It's a live life drawing class which you can do online, which lasts about 2 hours, done by a group of people in Belfast. Great model, great narration of things to think about and consider when you're doing life drawing. It's great for people just starting out. Some very good sound basics. There were a lot of quick poses and like a half an hour pose towards the end. It lasts about 2 hours long. And it costs £5. If you're looking for them, you can check them out on Instagram. It's called Figure This. You can have a look at them on Facebook as well. I think they've got another session coming up towards the middle of this month. Probably just the last one before Christmas, so we can get a break. But yeah, but really interesting. and really good poses, really well lit. Very similar to this, where you can just pump it up on the screen and you can draw along and have a go. You can upload what your response is. I posted some up on Twitter, so if you have a look at my Twitter account, it's Leeboyd Artist. It's Leeboyd Artist on Facebook and Leeboyd Artist on Instagram as well. If you have a look at my Twitter feed, you'll see my kind of quick sketches as well. I think there was like a minute pose, 3-minute pose, 5-minute pose, 10-minute pose, 15-minute pose. There was a break, there was a 10-minute pose, and there was like another half an hour pose. And they're as complex or as detailed or as difficult as you want to make them. But yeah, really good fun, really good experience. So try that out. You'll also find a link to Figure This as well, so you can go from there. When you sign up, it's through a process called Eventbrite, sorry. So you sign up electronically, and it literally about half an hour before it starts, they send you a link. Now, the thing is pre-recorded, but they do kind of, it's almost done like it is live, so there's no necessary conversation with you one-to-one, but there is a chat bar there. So there's a few people who are doing it who are chatting away in real time, but the whole thing is kind of recorded and laid out for you, so you don't have that fear of cameras breaking and stuff like that. So it was really, really good for that experience as well. So yeah, it's really well worth having a go. There's always a challenge from drawing from life than it is drawing from image. Now, again, it's not to say one's better than the other, but you certainly use observation skills in your process when you're doing life drawing. But it's funny how closely, drawing from a reference, these things match up. Yes, the image is flattened, but when you're looking at structure of lines and how lines flow into one another and what works and doesn't work in your pictures, it's really interesting to see that some of the processes that I may use for my life drawing I can use in working from a resource like a photograph. There's still that kind of old argument of people say, oh, you work from photograph, it's not real art. That's rubbish. I'll categorically say that's rubbish and stand behind it, because people use references all of the time. When training, people would have used old masters to go and copy to develop their training, and what you're going to say is that some of those old master copies inform some of the greatest artists in the world. So they may not have been a photograph, but in a painting, it's not that much different. So I would say use good quality references. That's the trick. If you can get your own good quality references, if you're going out there and you're considering the types of references that you need, and you're going out there and creating your own references, it adds another layer of creativity to your artwork, which has another layer of depth to it, because you have an understanding of what the artistic vision is. You've gone out there and constructed it. In your painting, you can still manipulate it a bit, so you're not a slave to the photograph, and it builds another layer and strengthens your artwork. If you're working from life, there's a certain amount of going back and observing, going back and observing, going back and observing. You might be able to do it in one sitting, if say you're doing a portrait, but every time that sitter comes back, they bring a new energy to your picture as well. So there's a great benefit from drawing from life, certainly from having a go at doing life drawing, because you're looking at a figure. There's certain rules to it that you can't get rid of. What does a foot look like? How does that foot I'm drawing, what does that look like? People have a fear of drawing feet, so there's a tendency to kind of pretend you've run out of paper because you've positioned it too far to the left, but actually you didn't want to draw feet and that's why you did it. But being honest with yourself is attempting to break it down, and what am I actually looking at is a shape. I'm not looking at certain elements that I find difficult to draw because there's so much information in a small space. That's generally what the issue is when we're drawing feet or hands. There's so many folds that we get visually lost into which fold are we drawing, which dark crease are we drawing, things like that. To break it down to a larger shape first, so you're taking some of that pressure away. mark goes up there a little bit more as well, doesn't it? Yeah. So say this is not perfect by any means. I'm not trying to be. I'm still finding its structure. He's become a little bit lifelike. He's got lost in certain areas, which I can bring back. I think this cheek is still further over there a little bit more. Not quite so defined. I think this whole area is a lot darker still. Sort of laying down some heavy application of mark of pastel in there. Definitely darker down this section. This, because I haven't quite figured out where that cheek is yet. I don't want to be too prescriptive and tell you that's definitely where it is, but I think it's in a better place when I move it across. But that's not going to affect where the shadow is. And this breaks down into this bit, so I know I'll be layering up charcoal on top of this, and this whole area needs to be darker. So again, next week when I start doing this, I'll probably layer this area down in darker to push this further forward, so I can see some of these highlights and shadows and where they need to go. There's a shadow there that goes across the top, well, from his nostril into where his eye is, and creates this really subtle light, almost like a diamond or a tiny rectangle of light just there, and as it comes up it catches his nose there. I think I just had that too far low down. It does then affect how this comes down, this comes out, which helps give me better structure to this eye. But I can play around and tweak and move it, and that's the enjoyable part about this process, about using charcoal on this pad. Is it's flexible and I can move things around. I'm not stuck to going, oh, it definitely has to be there. You know, I can spend my time really observing and marking out and measuring, but there is a bit of fun and element of sculpting on where things are. You know, happy element accents happen where, you know, a mark of where I think something is becomes a wonderful crease in the skin later on that I don't have to think about putting there because the processes develop how that helped it develop. This shadow light coming down, which is the shadow, cast shadow of his hair. Where does this was still goes in the same direction down here, but it's a bit darker. So he's starting to look a little bit muddy and lost and a bit fuzzy. So I can bring him back. I think I'll start that next week when we carry on with it. So yeah, I'm gonna finish about 5 minutes a little bit early. So I've done an hour and a bit and a half, whatever it is. Again, my apologies for not being here bang on 2 o'clock. We got here eventually. I will be back here, I will endeavour to be back here at 2 o'clock next week, next Saturday. And until then, enjoy yourselves. If you haven't got Sky Portrait Artist of the Year, go to the Sky TV Facebook page, live at 10 AM British Standard Time or GMT. And have a go yourself, 4 hours, and then upload your effort onto Instagram by using the hashtag MyPOATW, Portrait Artist of the Week. Put the hashtag in and you'll get to see some fabulous responses on there as well. It's a nice community of artists that have been built up over the last few weeks. It'll be good to see. So yeah, we look forward to doing a portrait of Jon Snow tomorrow morning. So yeah, I'll see you then. Until then, take care, look after yourselves. Hope your COVID gets a little bit easier. Hope ours does too, and we can start looking forward to having a bit of Christmas fun. Alright guys, thank you very much for being with us. Any questions you have, please send them. Put a little comment in the comment bar. Subscribe to the channel if you want to subscribe. Like it if you like it. And share it with your folks and friends who are also interested in having a look doing that as well. Alright,